Hello there, guys. So, I thought it was time that I made a new video. It's been a while since I made a video, and actually, this will be the first video on this new channel because I had to remake my old YouTube channel, which is unfortunate, but I lost access to that Gmail. So, not your Gmail, not your YouTube account, something like that. I don't know. It's hard to get away from Google, man. Because YouTube's such a good tool. Anyway, this video is going to be on a topic that I think is pretty important because I think it's relevant. Not because I think the arguments are relevant. I think the arguments are ridiculous. The arguments in favor of this fallacy that I'm going to debunk. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to debunk this fallacy that a block size decrease is obtainable in Bitcoin without a tremendous amount of risk and potential negative externalities. So the reason that this topic is relevant right now is because all of a sudden there's been a lot of talk about people upset that Blockspace, is being used to basically encrypt data into the Bitcoin time chain that a lot of Bitcoiners aren't happy with, don't feel like should be preserved in the ledger, on and on and on down the list. Like, I'm not here to necessarily talk about NFTs and inscriptions. I actually did a video on NFTs on my old channel. I'll try to re-upload it on this channel, but safe to say, I'm not a fan of NFTs. I made two videos like 2 years ago when NFTs were really first becoming popular, talking about all the problems with NFTs, like from a technical perspective and an economic perspective. I'm not a fan, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about the response that a lot of Bitcoiners have had to what they deem an inefficient or improper use of Bitcoin block space. So one of the proposed solutions, which for a long time now, I think a number of years, like almost 4 years now, has been a proposed solution to decrease the chain growth, the growth of the time chain size required to like store a fully archived Bitcoin full node, like without any pruning or anything. A long time idea proposed by Luke Dash Jr., who you all know and love, is for us to do a block size decrease. So what I want to talk about is there's two ways. Oh, that color. We can't have that. That color is bad. Here. Okay. Let me switch to a less offensive color. There. So there's two ways that we can decrease the block size on Bitcoin. So the first way is to do what's called a consensus change. So this is the only realistic way to actually decrease like the size of the blocks that propagate every 10 minutes to 300 kilobytes and consistently, ensure that that's what happens. And this means that we would go into the code of Bitcoin Core and we would change the rules and tighten the rule set to only allow blocks to be propagated to the network if they would only be in consensus if they were 300 kilobytes in size or less. Now, the problem with this is anybody running the old Bitcoin software and choosing to continue to propagate blocks in excess of 300 kilobytes up to the current cap, which, I think technically is 1 megabytes, but like the block itself can be up to 4 megabytes because the block weight. I'm not an expert on the technical intricacies of that information. So I don't want to say anything that sounds stupid, but the gist of it is that, the current block size is somewhere between 1 and 4 megabytes, depending on how much of that data is virtual memory or whatever, virtual bytes or something like that, because of the way that they've segregated witness data and created the witness discount. And that's what Taproot enabled, like people to take better advantage of these features enabled by segregating witness. And now people are using it to do things with the block space that weren't as popular before. It's always been possible to record information on the blockchain, but I'm getting distracted. I digress. So you don't want to do this because it poses the potential, not poses the potential, it would cause a hard fork, because some people would be mining on the old. So you've got people producing blocks right here under the new 300 kilobyte rules, and those blocks are fine. Those blocks would be accepted under the old rules that allow 1 megabyte. But as soon as someone propagates a block under these new rules, that's larger than the new software that says you can only do it if it's 300 kilobytes, it forks the chain. Now the chain splits because there's one where the tip of the chain is the 300 kilobyte block that was most recently discovered, and then there's one where the tip of the chain is 1 megabyte because the people running the older software still accept those, but this new software doesn't accept anything over 300, so that's going to split itself off into two chains. Now, you don't want a consensus split. It is like literally the worst case scenario in Bitcoin. It's terrible. It's terrible for security. It's terrible for like technical security. It's terrible for economic security. It just paints a bad picture. Like you don't want it. It opens up all kinds of like worms that we don't want open, unless we're in a situation where we absolutely have no choice. It's something that we have to do because it's like do or die scenario, like SHA-256 was just cracked and we need to risk a hard fork to change something about, I don't even know if changing encryption schemes would, or hashing algorithms would actually even cause a consensus change. But that's the kind of thing where it'd be like such a serious problem that we're risking actually Bitcoin ceasing to function unless we like risk, a consensus split. That's like really the only situation where you'd want to risk something like this. So this is off the table, like in this scenario where people are storing JPEGs in the blockchain. So get the idea out of your head that like a hard fork I mean, feel free if you want to try it, go ahead and try to do it. But that's why I say it's off the table, because go ahead and try. Like it's not going to work. It's going to fail. So that's really the ultimate problem with it. So the second way that you could achieve like a block size decrease would be to what I've finally been able to tease out of Luke through a series of tweets. Not tighten the consensus rules for how blocks are created, but create either social pressure or monopoly pricing schemes to basically get miners to collude to only create blocks that are 300 kilobytes. Now, there's a lot of reasons why this is stupid. And if you've ever read Rothbard in particular, you will know that there's a lot of historical examples of why this won't work. So the reason that this is monopoly pricing, I guess I should explain first and foremost, is because all else being equal, if you have a 300 kilobyte block and you have a 1 megabyte block, all else being equal, like let's say there's plenty of fees in the mempool, all else being equal, this 1 megabyte block that you include 1 megabyte worth of transactions in and collect those fees, that's going to be on net, all else being equal, right? We're not talking about weird edge case scenarios here. All else being equal, this is going to be more profitable for the miner that discovered the block than this, okay? And what a lot of these people are claiming, these proponents of Luke's goofy ideas, are that if enough of the miners engage in this behavior where they're setting monopoly prices on Blockspace by limiting the amount of block space that they're selling to consumers, they can then raise the prices of this more scarce block space because they're limiting the amount that can be sold. Now, this in economics is what's known as monopoly pricing, okay? And monopolies always fail. They always fail in competitive and free and open markets, okay? Rothbard wrote about this a lot. The reason that it's monopoly pricing is because anybody can come in. Well, the reason it's monopoly pricing because you're artificially limiting. You're saying, yes, we have all this extra space, but we're going to leave that empty for the good of Bitcoin, for our own, because we're such nice guys and we want Bitcoin to succeed. We're going to leave the rest of this money down here that we could have made from these fees that would have been included in a full 1 megabyte block. We're going to not take that money, and we're going to shortchange ourselves for the good of the world and for charity and for Bitcoin, because we're just really, really good people. You are getting less revenue on a net basis than a miner that says, well, I'm not going to do that. That's dumb. Why would I do that when I can mine, 3 times more transactions into this block and collect 3 times more fees? A lot of people are looking at this like with tunnel vision because they see the block subsidy, which makes up such a large portion of the money that miners get paid for discovering a block. And they can't imagine a world where demand for block space is increasing, as Bitcoin as a technology protocol is increasing and demand for Bitcoin is increasing. Block space, we would conclude, is going to increase as well because it's a scarce resource required for the operation of Bitcoin. So monopoly pricing would be if you were to get everybody to say somehow to get all of these miners spread out all over the world, all operating under their own incentive schemes with all of their own overhead and incentive structures and profit motives, to collude together to artificially limit the amount of block space being sold to the market in the form of auctioning off the block space every 10 minutes to the highest bidders, then you're going to increase the prices on this scarce amount of block space. And that price increase is going to offset, if not completely eliminate, these extra fees that you would have made because you're colluding with us in this monopoly. Now, these things always fail, guys. Historically, they have always failed. Rothbard wrote about this. Rothbard talked about this extensively. The railroad companies in the United States actually tried to do this. They tried to limit the amount of freight trains and passenger trains that could travel like across the country and how fast they could go and how many passengers could be on board and how much cargo they could carry, all so that the railroads could like raise their rates in tandem and create like monopoly pricing on these things. And the railroad industry was, one, it was heavily regulated. Two, it was already kind of a monopoly to begin with because the majority of the big railroad businesses were heavily subsidized by the government. And the railroads couldn't even do it. This failed because there were always other railroads that would come in and secretly undercut this monopoly scheme because monopoly pricing doesn't work. Because even though on paper it may look like the fees are going to go up and everyone's going to get richer, there's always going to be that one participant that's going to come in and say, well, I'm just going to mine the block and fill it all the way up and take advantage of all of these extra fees that people are leaving around the table. And on a net basis, all else being equal, this miner that chooses not to leave the revenue on the table is going to outcompete the people that are doing this monopoly scheme for whatever reason, whether they're doing it for altruism and charity to try to make the world a better place, or whether they're doing it because they actually think they can create monopoly pricing on block space. Either way, it doesn't matter. These miners will be outcompeted and put out of business by the miners that are more profitably satisfying the demand for block space from the consumer. This is how markets work. This is how competition in markets work. And this is why monopolies cannot exist. And Bitcoin is so much more decentralized, so much more harder to coordinate changes in, and filled with so many more individuals with all of their own interests all over the world than the railroad industry was. If it didn't work in railroads, guys, it's not going to work in Bitcoin. This is a pipe dream. This is ridiculous. And this is why, if these are our two options, the block space size decrease is a fallacy. It's just not going to happen.